guys so much for coming. My name is Lisey Good, and I'm the founder of a group called Wild Cohasset. You'll hear a little bit more about that later. One of our board members is sitting in the audience today too, Susan. So we are going to talk about attracting more butterflies to your garden. And I'm going to start with this quote by a poet, Mario Quintana, and I think he meant this metaphorically, but we're going to talk about it a little bit more literally today. So I will start with sort of a confession that I'm not like a big gardener. In fact, I never liked to garden. It was my chore as a kid to weed and pick up sticks, and I hated it more than anything, and I always said I'm never going to do that as an adult, and it's literally what I spend 50% of my days doing now with my group Wild Cohasset, so somehow it stuck. Oh, there we go. See a nice little swallowtail there. Okay, so this is what got me started in liking gardening. I had feeders in my yard. I certainly had plants like anyone else. When I started to notice that hummingbirds were preferring jewelweed, which I had been weeding, I'd been plucking it out. When I started to realize that they really preferred that over my feeders, I thought, maybe they know something, or maybe nature knew something better than I do. And I started to realize that truthfully, what I had thought is that these things were visiting my yard. I started to realize, wait a minute, actually I've moved into their yard. So I have the option to kind of make things better for them. Maybe it's not always going to be as perfect for me as I want, but it will be better for them. And I feel like when I made that switch of gardening for wildlife, it was when I have never enjoyed my garden more than that. It's like all the creatures repaid me, like there's this soundtrack of birds and butterflies, and it just became something living, even more living than a regular garden would. So I found butterflies to be probably the most exciting thing to get in my garden. So that's why I wanted to talk about them today. But the general thing that I want to sort of underscore here, because I find most people don't love bugs. It's not their first thing that they love. But no bugs, no birds. Like we really have to remember that all birds, even eagles as babies, need bugs. So it's something that we can't keep doing what we're doing in terms of just trying to wipe out all the bugs. I'm sure I am preaching to the choir on that one. But so let's talk about how to get more of the ones you want to see to your yard. Okay, so I want to talk about some of the common butterflies that you might see. In Massachusetts, it's believed that we have about 160 types of butterflies that pass through or live here. And probably about 30 of them are considered quite common. And there are places where you can see, maybe 60 different species, like Weir Hill in Andover. It's a trustee's property that's sort of, among other things, known for butterflies. Some of the tips that I'm going to talk about today are specific to particular butterflies, but most of them are very general. And all of them are going to help everybody. All of them are going to help the environment and all the other little creatures that you might want to visit your garden as well. Okay. This one is considered one of the most common. It's the red admiral. They're medium-sized. They're about 2.5 inches diameter wingspan. They're migratory, which means they fly south for the winter. And when you talk about butterflies migrating, it's not necessarily like a bird where that one individual is flying to Mexico and back. It's generations that are making their way down and then back, which I don't know, I think that's even more special kind of. The best places to see these guys are in moist areas next to a forest. Anybody that knows sort of birds or anything like that, you know that the edges of things are where you see everything, tons of things, obviously, just because there's more diversity there of environment and the things that would attract them. So one thing that I think is really neat about these butterflies is they're considered to be very calm, chill butterflies. Like they're not going to freak out if you get very close to them, and they often even land on humans, which I think is maybe a little startling, but is pretty neat. This is not a butterfly, but I have to include it because it's probably like my favorite little creature on Earth. It's a hummingbird moth. And I don't know if you guys know the difference between a butterfly and a moth. The butterflies, I know some of us do, but butterflies are usually larger and more colorful, but the main thing is how their wings move. So butterflies this way, moths this way. So you can impress your friends with little factoids. So hummingbird moths, they think that it's probably why people started to believe that there were fairies in the woods, because you can see they kind of have that, like the little antenna on the little tiny wings. They act and look a lot like hummingbirds. They're smaller. You can hear them buzz in the same way that you can hear hummingbirds when they're nearby. And there are different varieties that you'll see here. This is a clear wing for obvious reasons. If you see them at night on your plant, that's probably a sphinx version of hummingbird moths. And I just, as I said, I had to include these because I want you to try and attract them to your yard.
So are they common to our area?
Yeah, oh yeah, yep, absolutely. Isn't it amazing? I mean, you see them and you're kind of like, wait, what is that? A hummingbird? Is that? I just adore them. And unlike, the thing about hummingbirds liking the color red, it is true. I hope you're not using red nectar in your feeders. Clear nectar is much healthier for hummingbirds, and you'll get just as many. Don't worry. But they like all colors, and hummingbirds like other colors too. Just like the jewelweed, slide I showed you, that they love that. So it's kind of a myth that you must have red to get hummingbirds. This is a white admiral. These are big. Their wingspan is usually about 4 inches, but it can be like 5 inches. So they're like dramatic to see flying around your yard. Like all butterflies, they have taste receptors in their feet, so they know right away when they land on something if it's good for them to eat. And I always think I live in Boston, and so when I'm walking my dogs, there's food everywhere on the ground, and I'm so glad my dogs don't have taste receptors in their feet, or we would never get anywhere. These guys, you notice that I've included the caterpillars and what they look like, because I feel like so many people might come across something like that in their yard and be so creeped out and want to kill it, want to get rid of it. And I think it's really important to remember you need these to get these. So don't immediately think, oh God, get that thing out of my garden. Their caterpillars need willow, aspen, or birch trees, or they're extremely important for their migration. We'll talk a lot about butterfly habitat and things that they need in your yard later, but I'll talk about a specific tree that's really helpful for this butterfly. They are easiest to see in April through October, which is their mating season. Okay, we all know this one, monarch butterflies. You may have heard that they're in steep decline. They're doing better on the West Coast than they are here, and their population can vary dramatically from year to year. But basically, over 1 billion have been lost since the 90s. 90% of their population. So they really need our help. They were added to the endangered species list this past summer. So I think when we think about endangered species, we often think about rhinos or leopards. This is one you might very likely have in your yard. So that's why I'm excited to see people here looking to see what they can do to help them. They're a major reason that I founded Wild Cohasset, and that my partners in Wild Cohasset do what we do, because there's something that we can really help them with. Whereas I don't know how much we can do to help leopards around here, unfortunately. They are large butterflies, similarly sized to the white admirals we just saw. They can be up to 5 inches wingspan, but usually closer to 4. They migrate south generally in September, and you can sometimes see flocks of them, hundreds of them together, which is something that I saw in childhood and I've never forgotten. It's literally like clouds of orange. It's just astonishing. Okay, this guy obviously looks a ton like the monarch. Although obviously the caterpillar is pretty hideous compared to the pretty little stripy monarch caterpillar. The main difference on this is something you can see when the wings are folded up. It's this black line right there. So monarchs don't have that, viceroys do. I think that you can really impress your friends if you see a viceroy go by and you're like, no, that's not a monarch, that is a viceroy. They'll be extremely, extremely impressed with you. The coolest thing to me about viceroys is that they don't migrate, they stay here. Their caterpillars find a leaf, roll themselves up in it, and then they wait until the next breeding season and they come out. And I feel so guilty, like this is karma that I'm here talking about how to help them, because when I was a kid, someone taught me, like, when you see a leaf rolled up, unroll it and you can see something interesting. So I probably killed gazillions of these things as a child just out of pure, like, curiosity. So anyway, our next one here, this is a black swallowtail. Our group recently put in our first garden for wildlife on the grounds of the Scituate Animal Shelter, and we've seen tons of these there, which is just really, really exciting. They're what you think of with a butterfly. You know, they're huge, they're beautiful, they're stunning. They like parks, roadsides, yards, even marshes. It used to be thought when they were first sort of categorized that they were breeding in wetlands. That's not true. They love herbs. So if you have parsley, you may get some nice little some of these guys on it. They also look similar to a poisonous butterfly that to confuse predators, but they are not. Okay, the American lady, I think these are gorgeous. They have, you can't really see here, but they have purple spots on them, so they're really vibrant and lovely. They're medium sized, and then their underside has this great pattern. It's obviously not camouflage because it's supposed to look like eyes. You know, it's obvious. It's to make people think maybe that a predator is lurking behind and go away. I've also heard some people think that, you know, it's a hypothesis, all of this. They don't know exactly why they have these eyes or these sort of cobwebby things. But I think some people have postulated that maybe it's to encourage a predator to bite here instead of here. I don't think it would be good for the butterfly either way. So, but in any case, it's pretty cool. They like open landscapes with leafy flowering plants. So it probably sounds like a lot of people's yards or gardens. Okay, this one is not as showy or dramatic, but it's very cool. It's called an Eastern comma. It's called that because of this little bit that almost looks like someone took, you know, white out or something. I guess I'm dating myself. I don't know if they still have white out, but anyway, they're about 2 inches. They're little. They are very unusual in that they love rotting things. They're not necessarily going for flowers. They're going for like dead animals or fermented fruit. And we'll talk a little bit more about fruit and how you can help and attract more butterflies through fruit. One thing that's very neat about these is that they don't migrate, they stay here and they hibernate as butterflies. So they need places that have crevices, and one of the birch trees that I'm going to talk about is a great idea for that. I like to think about the fact that, oops, I'm going to go back for a second. All of us should think in our yards of keeping one particular area kind of wild and ugly and messy. Animals, creatures, all wildlife will really benefit from that. These butterflies need that. They need a place where they can hide, and most people's gardens, most people's lovely manicured yards might not give them the kind of stuff they need. So you'll see I'll talk a lot about that later. But definitely leaving a spot of your yard messy, wild, dead, not raking it, not doing anything to it is one of the best things that you could do. And it will help everything from endangered rabbits to, and I'm not talking about the rabbits that we all see everywhere. I'm talking about the endangered species, turtles, butterflies, birds, etc. Okay, this guy is an invasive butterfly. You've all heard of invasive plants. It's called the white cabbage butterfly. Its caterpillar is also called the cabbage worm, to give you a sense. They're not a problem as butterflies, and they're probably not a problem for most of us. They're a problem to agriculture, to farmers. They love plants in the cruciferous vegetable family, and they can wipe out entire crops of broccoli and stuff like that. So I don't think we need to worry about them. I imagine that people at like Holly Hill Farm aren't so excited when they see them. There was a recent project to find out kind of what happened and why they ended up where they ended up. It was a citizen science thing where they asked people to capture them and to send in their bodies so that they could look at the DNA. And it confirmed what people thought, which is that they are from Eastern Europe, but they made their way other places along the Silk Route to Asia, and then from there elsewhere. I don't know. I kind of have this image of them like perched on people's shoulders, and I think probably people were planting crops en route along this pathway, and that's how it happened. But they are a problem, and they're a reminder to me, and I wanted to include them here, that humans have really tinkered with Mother Nature a ton, and that, at least from my perspective, the more we have messed with nature, the more responsibility we have now to try and fix what we've broken. Okay, so I'm going to talk about tips of how you can try and get more in your yard, and the ones that do visit, keep them healthier and happier. The first thing, it's like with medicine, first, do no harm. So that's what I want to talk about. When I talked about messy spots in your yard, this is what I'm talking about. And this is what wild creatures prefer. They look at a golf course, and that to them might as well be a desert or an asphalt parking lot, truly. There's just nothing to feed them or support them there. So if you've got bits of this in your yard, maybe hidden by, shrubs or a fence or something like that, you'll be doing a great thing for all these creatures that we want to help. I have areas like this that's where I put the Christmas tree, or places where I've raked, I put the leaves there. Any dead branches get hauled over there. Anything that falls in that area just stays there. Maybe you've heard this, that a dead tree gives back to nature for 100 years. So you don't want to just instantly get rid of all that stuff. I'm using this too because this is, I think, two very cool ways of creating a habitat pile in your yard. Two very aesthetically pleasing ways. This is very sculptural, and this, they've just draped it around. I think you have to be careful of not getting too close to the bark, because you don't want to create too much moisture or mold or things like that in there. But I think it's a nice way of creating some natural habitat areas where creatures can hide from predators, hibernate, etc., and where bugs can grow. Okay, I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here on this one. This is the number one thing. No pesticides, no chemical fertilizers. The reason every talk I give, I'm obsessed with dogs, so every talk I give has pictures of dogs in it at some point. But there was a study done recently by Tufts University where they looked at people's dogs that were living on properties where they treated the grass. And they treated the grass professionally, so it wasn't improperly applied. And the people adhered to the rules of keeping the dogs off for 24 hours. And they found that not just the dogs who lived on that property, but the neighboring dogs as well had much higher rates of a type of lymphoma that's fatal that was almost unheard of about 50 years ago. So there's no question this stuff is truly terrible, and you can imagine if it's harming dogs who are kept off it for 24 hours, what is it doing to everything else? So it's and also this is the other thing too, the chemical fertilizers are running off into the water, and this is why we get these. This is Cohasset's, the pond in Cohasset's village green. It's why we get this unsightly, sometimes dangerous, different kind of algae blooms. So I just say, please, it's why we don't have fireflies anymore. They live underground for a couple years before they're born. So if you do anything, don't do this. That's not grammatically correct, but you know what I mean. Okay. I want to talk a little bit about birds. It's when you think about, do I want to help birds or butterflies? I can't tell you which one I want to help most. But when we're talking about specifically trying to attract more butterflies to our yard, the placement of feeders becomes important. You want to keep, it's obvious, but you want to keep the feeders fairly far away from the nectar plants or the plants where you're hopefully hosting butterflies, because it's just gonna, you don't want to make it easy for them just to snack on these caterpillars. I love these kind of feeders for two reasons. I think a lot of people don't know, to prevent bird strikes against your window, which are almost always fatal even if the bird flies away, you want to keep your feeders within 3 feet or more than 10 feet away from windows. So bird feeders in the window like this are awesome. You also, to protect the birds, you want to make sure that there's about 10 feet of open space around the bird feeder so that there is nowhere close by that a predator can hide. And for us, that's probably almost always cats, which are highly responsible for killing songbirds, unfortunately. Okay. Next thing in the first do no harm, remove invasive plants. Yes.
Excuse me, on the previous slide. So we probably had 10 bird feeders, and we had so many beautiful birds that then we got woodpeckers, and they started putting holes like this on the side of our house.
On the side of the house.
And on the side of our neighbor's house.
Yeah.
So we had to pull them all, and I just felt really bad, and how do we not attract woodpeckers?
Woodpeckers. Well, the question is about how to not attract woodpeckers. I'm not a woodpecker expert, but I do know that you will generally not attract woodpeckers to your feeder unless you're using the mixtures that have a lot of nuts and things in them. So it probably can be something about what type of bird food you're putting in the feeders. The more different types of bird food you put in your feeders, the more different types of birds you'll get. But it's interesting because also I think that there are specific woodpecker-specific things that you can put in maybe elsewhere so they stay away from the other birds. But you can contact me. My contact information will be at the end, and I can, because I think I've read something about this. I just can't remember it perfectly now. Okay, so this is the invasive plant that I'm going to show you 2 of them. This is extremely common in this area. Probably looks more like this now. It will look like this by May. It's called garlic mustard. It's terrible. You want to get rid of it because if you have 1 plant this year, you will have up to 3,000 next year. No exaggeration. And it changes the soil chemistry so that eventually nothing else can grow where it is growing. So my group does a ton of work with this plant. We have an event coming up on Earth Day this year where volunteers will pick it because it's very satisfying. It's not that hard to get rid of. And you can, if you know every plant you're picking is, up to 5,000, 3,000 to 5,000 that you've prevented, it's awesome. It outright kills one particular type of butterfly, which is endangered. We don't have them a lot here, but they're called the West Virginia white. And the main problem with it is that it outcompetes our native plants and the things that butterflies used to rely on, birds used to rely on, everybody kind of needs. A lot of our roadsides used to be full of milkweed, which is the only plant in the world that monarch butterflies can successfully lay their eggs on, the only one in the world. our roadsides, not so much in Cohasset because we've done so much work there, but boy, Hingham, I mean, all in this area, it's just a real problem. So again, this is one, my group makes house calls if you're worried you might have it. So you can contact me at the end and we'll see if you have it and give you advice on how to get rid of it. So when you get rid of it, you have to put it in a trash bag, sealed trash bag, and throw it away. Do not compost it. Next one. This one is horrifying. It's called black swallowwort. It's all over the US, but it is a worse problem in Massachusetts than anywhere else because it was brought here deliberately, they think, to Harvard as a botanical specimen, and it either escaped or someone thought, oh, how interesting, I'll plant it here. It's a very hardy vine. Unfortunately, these pods open up and all the seeds go airborne like dandelion fluff, so it can spread. If you have one in your neighborhood, you might be spreading it, not thousands of miles. You might be spreading thousands of plants, up to a couple miles away. So it's a real big problem. The reason it's so terrible for monarchs is that it's a cousin of the milkweed. So monarchs who are increasingly looking desperately for milkweed and can't find it, they see this, which is, it's, when you talk about it, it's all over Cambridge, all over Boston, it's all over Cohasset. It's really a problem. They see this and they think, oh my God, thank God, I finally found some milkweed. They lay their egg on it, and then the second the caterpillars are born, they chomp on this leaf and they die. So it's really one. My group does a lot. August is the best time to get rid of it because it's when these pods are formed. It's really tough to get rid of though. Unlike garlic mustard, which is fairly easy, if prolific, this stuff is, you see in Cambridge, you can see stems this wide growing on, it's just really bad. Okay, so now on to the positive stuff. If you want them to come to you, you can add some good stuff. What you need to make sure they have are these things: habitat, host plants for eggs and caterpillars, nectar plants. They like pollen too. They will eat pollen as well, but nectar is what will really get them excited. And then water and minerals. Okay, so we're talking about habitat. I always wondered before I looked into this what butterflies do in the rain and what, it seems like they're so delicate with their little delicate wings. The average raindrop weighs 70 milligrams. I don't even know what that, we know what a raindrop's like, tiny. But the average butterfly only weighs about 500. So to them, a raindrop or a rainstorm feels like what would feel to us a 20-pound water balloon being hurled at us all over. So you can imagine they need to go somewhere to stay safe. And they're strong, so they can hold on as long as they find somewhere to hide and weather the storm. But again, if your yard looks like a beautiful manicured golf course, there's probably very little place that they can safely go quickly. They cling to the underside of leaves. They tuck themselves into the crevices of rocks, which is another reason why I love our rock gardens here. I'm from New Jersey, and we don't have nearly so many of these incredible rock walls. Although in New Jersey, when you're trying to garden, you're not hitting a damn rock every second that you. So, but you can also install butterfly houses. I don't know really how effective these are, and you have to make sure that they are non-toxic paint or unpainted and never made out of pressure-treated wood. When they talk about pressure-treated, they inject insecticides and stuff into the wood, so that's never what you want. I think it could, like the comma butterfly we talked about earlier that hibernates as an adult. You might have them. I don't think you're going to really see them or know, but I don't think it can hurt as long as they're non-toxic. And shrubs, evergreen shrubs, great for birds, great for butterflies. Okay, in terms of providing food, the next thing on the list for butterflies, native plants. Native plants, I cannot overstate how important native plants are for just about any creature and the earth. So native plants this is the Garden in the Woods in Framingham. It's incredible if you haven't been. It's run by the Native Plant Trust. Everything in there is native, and it's stunning. So it's really inspirational. For those who don't know, native plants are just plants that were here before the European settlers got here. So they are the plants that evolved together with our wildlife. So they have this great relationship back and forth. They provide exactly what each other needs. And that's what's a lot out of whack now, because I think people who don't know would be surprised that just about everything we have in our gardens is not native. You know, there are native rhododendrons, but lots of the species that we use are not. Lilacs are not, you know, daffodils, tulips, no. You know, wisteria, English ivy, you know, on and on and on and on. Just about most of the things that we like are not native. So one thing that Susan Anthony taught me is that it's very important, if you're buying native plants from a nursery, you want to make sure that they're not cultivars. You want to make sure that they are true native plants. So it needs a little bit of research maybe, or talking to the nursery to make sure, because when they're cultivars, it means that they've been tinkered with to make them more appealing to us. It means maybe they have longer bloom seasons, or they are showier, or something that may make them less beneficial to wildlife. So that's just an important thing. And for now anyway, it probably means you're going to have to ask a few questions or do a little research. I think probably any native is better than non-native, but true natives are really what's going to do the best for wildlife. Okay. Let's see how we're doing for time here. Okay. So when you think about what plants you want to add in, what native plants are absolutely going to help butterflies and wildlife the most, number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the list is milkweed. Okay, so milkweed is just crucial. I mentioned that it's the only plant that monarch butterflies can successfully lay eggs on. I do know a lot of people worry about milkweed because it's an aggressive spreader. So swamp milkweed is the one that we recommend because it's a little bit less aggressive in terms of its spreading. Honestly, I would say you're probably going to be weeding anyway, so if it spreads, deal with it that way, because I think the benefits really outweigh the negatives. It grows to about 3 to 5 feet high. It has a gorgeous fragrance, so I find it really wonderful. Swamp milkweed, the adult butterflies drink the nectar. They lay eggs on the plant. The monarch caterpillars eat it. And I want to share a quick story. I wonder if I have that. Yeah. So this is a monarch caterpillar eating some milkweed. You know, it never occurred to me. People often ask, what plants should I put in to help butterflies? And someone had asked me this. I gave her a list. She put in a lot of plants, and then she called me later that year and said, yes, I saw tons of butterflies, but I was really unhappy because something is eating all the leaves. and then I realized, oh wait, I should have told you. That's what happened. That's the whole point. You know, that's what you want. So you have to recognize that your leaves are going to have nice little munchy bits out of them if you want to, have this cycle in your garden. And to me, it's obviously worth it. And you can also, you have enough plants and enough sort of variety and stuff. It's not unsightly, but it's less of a perfect manicured look, more of a sort of natural kind of thing. Not only will milkweed attract butterflies, I'm going to just read you this quick list of birds that it will attract. It's just insane. Hummingbirds, mockingbirds, vireos, woodpeckers. Now it attracts the woodpeckers because of the insects that are attracted to it. Sparrows, chickadees, titmice, crows, jays, finches, thrushes, nuthatches, waxwings, cardinals, grosbeaks, orioles, wood warblers, and wrens. So it's just amazing. If you want a garden that is truly alive, I would definitely suggest this. Okay, this next one I think it's a slightly similar looking plant. It's Joe Pye weed. It bothers me that so many of these amazing native plants have weed in the name, but this is another really tall one. It's another superstar. It will attract millions of different butterflies, pollinators, birds. It's amazing. Okay, not all of the plants that you want for butterflies are tall. You do want a variety. Violets are great. New England violets, they're especially good because they bloom at a time of year when not a lot else is blooming. So that's a really, you can imagine that's an important thing. You don't want literal feast or famine in your yard. You want to be able to have things for them throughout the whole season.
These are generally sunny plants.
Do you know, violets, I mean, I think that they can do well. You know, the truth about native plants is they're usually hardier than other plants. I've seen these, I mean, I think they're often shady, right, yeah. Susan? In the shade? They do, but yeah, that's what, I mean, I've seen them. And the flowers are edible, even better. Nice, beautiful on a salad. So they really are very important as a nectar source early in the year. This next one I mentioned, I would tell you about a specific tree that's great, and that's the river birch. This is the kind with that really showy, peeling bark. They support the eastern tiger swallowtail butterfly in their migration because that bark is incredible for providing crevices where little creatures can hide out storms or get warm. And they serve as a host plant for 2 different other type of butterflies. Great for birds. I love them. Okay, the next one I want to mention is a buttonbush. I love these plants. They attract just a massive number of pollinators, at-risk bumblebees, birds, and I love for people to consider this plant as an alternative to butterfly bush, to Buddleias. Now, from what I understand, Buddleias can be invasive. Butterflies adore them, but the analogy that I've heard is like if you want your kids to eat fruit and you put out a big bowl of fruit and a big bowl of M&Ms, they're going to go for the M&Ms. I think that butterfly bush is similar to that. So of course it's going to attract butterflies, but it's maybe not as good for them as some of the more wholesome alternatives. Button bushes are particularly attractive to skippers and monarchs, but any butterfly that's in the area will probably go to this. And can you tell what kind of butterfly this is? It is not a monarch. It's a viceroy. Excellent, excellent. Okay. Damp side? Okay, good to know, good to know. So buttonbush wants a little bit of damp. Okay, little blue stem, grasses are important too, especially if they're planted near nectar plants. They give places to hide when they're thick. And this little blue stem actually, it's a specific host for the wood nymph and 9 type of skipper butterflies. So you don't need only flowers. But I'm going to show you 2 more flowers. These are 2 great natives, bee balm. They attract swallowtail butterflies, shown here. They're fantastic plant for native, attracting wildlife, and they're very easy to grow. New England asters. These guys, like violets, are excellent because, again, they're blooming later in the season, so they're giving sustenance at a time when there's probably not a lot else out there, and they're great for native bees. A lot of our native bees are really at risk in our area. Okay. The next thing I mentioned, that they need water and minerals and other nutrients. This is a great thing to do, especially if we have a drought. It will help save butterflies that might otherwise perish in extreme drought. Basically, you want it, anytime you add water to your garden, you're going to get more birds, you're going to get more butterflies. And this is the specific way that butterflies like to get their water. This is called a puddling station. You can take a bird bath, you can take a terracotta saucer, just fill it with soil, gravel, organic soil, gravel or sand, small pebbles, a couple of large perching rocks, and then you moisten it. You don't want it to be like a lake. You want it to just be like really, really wet soil or really, really wet sand. And you sprinkle a little sea salt on it. And then you can top up the water as needed, a little bit of sea salt every couple weeks. And this will really attract them and give them what they need and want. And you put it in a sunny spot.
Is the salt the mineral?
I think it's the minerals I think that's what they get something from the minerals. Yeah, exactly. I don't even know why. I just am like, okay. Someone told me, put the salt on. And
Especially the males.
the males?
For reproductive reasons.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so
Mud puddle clubs.
aha. Okay, so the males really need these minerals for during the mating season. Good to know. So we talked about fruit a little bit. The same way, some of the butterflies we talked about, like rotting fruit, rotting stuff like this. Just like I don't know if anybody's done this to try and attract Baltimore Orioles, putting out sliced oranges. Same deal. Put it out, let it kind of rot. Before you put it out, you want to poke it with I don't think that's a verb, but you want to poke it with a toothpick, a sharp knife, or a fork, like a potato, before you put it in the oven. What you want is a place for their proboscis to be able to easily get in. So you want to make it a little messier, not too pristine. But you can literally put out kiwis, banana slices, orange slices, apple slices, pear slices, whatever you want. Leave it out there in a sunny spot. You can layer them on the puddling station if you want. If you're having a problem with ants, you could float them in a little bit of water in a shallow dish, and then that sort of forms a moat where the ants can't get onto. Or you could do this clever idea with like a shepherd's crook or something like that to hang it and allow them. And it's really fun because you really can, they stay there for a while, so you can really kind of observe them. Okay, so I wanted to leave you, if I could get this to play, which there's no guarantee, but I told you that my group, Wild Cohasset, has just put in last summer a wildlife garden on the grounds of the Situate Animal Shelter. And we're incredibly excited because we got a major grant to put in a pollinator meadow in Wheelwright Park in Cohasset this summer. So you're all welcome to visit when that's in place. But this is like a 2-minute little video that shows you some of the creatures that were attracted to the garden at the Situate Animal Shelter this past summer. I just felt like it was so amazing how, like, if you build it, they will come. Like I know this works, but it was so exciting to kind of see it in place. So I'll see if I can do this. Yeah, all right. Well, you can't hear the music, which is what makes you cry while you're watching this, but. We put this in an area where all the people that walk, all the volunteers who walk dogs at the shelter walk by it all the time, so it's great. These are some of our teen volunteers who get community service. So here you see the little leaf bits. I'm not sure if you realize how at risk bumblebees are. There are lots of different species, and overwhelmingly we only have one. Here's my favorite. People are so scared of wasps that lots of them don't sting, they're really gentle. This is one of our endangered ones, so we were really excited to see that. Yeah, people don't realize that milkweed's super important to birds, not just for the flowers. These guys are like this big, they're tiny. We saw lots of monarchs this summer, which was really, really exciting. And you see what that monarch is on. Milkweed. Great. Okay, so our web address is wildcohasset.org. If you have any questions, if you want a house call to see if you're afraid of maybe invasive plants, you can go there and there's a contact us button and you'll get me. Well, thank you so much. Thank you.